finish up today, Middle East. So this will be it. And then we'll have a test next week and then we'll move on. All right, we'll start here. We're not going to do that, but if you look at the politics of the Middle East today, one thing that you will notice is it's always sort of, the Middle East is always in turmoil. You always find, disputes, territorial disputes. I kind of showed y'all videos of Jacob as he went to Syria, and when he was in Syria, it was just a lot of it was just blown to smithereens. I do have an interesting story to show you about a guy who fights in the UFC. He's from Morocco, and his name is Francis Ngannou, and he's really an interesting guy because he was from Morocco, and he was basically extremely poor. He wanted to escape, and if you look right here where Morocco is located, he wanted to come to Spain, okay, but he was forbidden to do so, and he escaped, but they caught him. They brought him back. Then he actually made it to Spain, and then Spain put him in jail for 2 years, something like that. So then he was basically a homeless guy in Spain for a while, and he walked into a gym, and you ought to see what the guy looks. The guy looks like a monster. He's like huge. He's a heavyweight, and when he knocks people out, he's like a power punching guy. And the gym owner had to be like, holy crap, where'd this guy come from? He walks into an MMA gym and he's like, yeah, I want to fight and I want to be the champ. And about maybe I'd say 3 or 4 years later, he became the UFC champion. He's the champion now. He just won the title. But his story is going from being in a place like Morocco where, you have no freedoms. It's a very sort of strict government, and then coming to Spain and eventually coming to the United States. He trains in Nevada. And he's just got an interesting story. So we'll try to look at him and see, what he's all about. But armed territorial disputes is not uncommon in these places. For years and years, like Libya, in the 80s, before you were even thought of, we had this conflict with Libya. When I was in the Army, I had to put this map up. And it didn't, like, maps in the Army usually show topography, a lot of land and stuff. They don't have words on them. So I'd put it up upside down. So the map was up, and all these generals and these, important people were looking at it, and they were like, what in the world? They couldn't figure out what was going on. And then the sergeant major was looking at it. And that's who I worked for. He looked at me like, you idiot. I was like, well, who's dumber, me for putting it up upside down, or for these idiots for not figuring out that it's upside down? But Libya was a place that we almost invaded. When Reagan was the president, we bombed Libya, and we actually killed the leader, Gaddafi. He killed his son. You recently, Obama backed militants in Libya who overthrew Gaddafi and killed him in the streets, and that was like really kind of brutal. We might look at a little bit of that as well. Egypt used to be really stable. It's sort of, it fell under the leadership of a group called the Muslim Brotherhood. So you do have turmoil there. Saudi Arabia is pretty, calm now. Oman, Iran, United Arab Emirates, pretty, no fighting within themselves. But you're going to see that they do fight with other people. Iran really hates Israel, but we'll go into that in a minute as well. Comparing the governments here, I'm not going to make you know a lot of any of this, but it is interesting to know. In Saudi Arabia, you have a monarchy, meaning you have a king. It's a hereditary king that's in charge, and basically ministers help govern. But it's the main thing to understand, it is governed by Islamic law. If I could find the American Dad, y'all ever watch American Dad? I don't know if it's appropriate for school. Maybe it is or not. hard to say. I don't think it's like TV 14 or something like that. But there's a great episode where Stan, who is in the CIA, they tell him, you got to go to Saudi Arabia. He's like, man, that's terrible. But when he gets there, he realizes, hey, Saudi Arabia is great if you're a what? If you're a man. If you're a man, it's great. If you're a woman, not so good. So in the episode, he like marries another girl, because in Saudi Arabia, they practice polygamy. You can have many wives. I don't know why you'd want to, but hey, whatever. I don't want one. But anyway, Islamic law rules. So women are not treated very well. In fact, just recently, women got the right to drive. That's right, drive. Now, women can't leave without being accompanied by a male. It could be their son. It could be their husband. Usually the son is the second in charge, no matter his age. Opposition is not tolerated. You cannot oppose the government. I do watch interesting shows. This history can be boring, but in a lot of ways it's fascinating because they have this show. It's called Locked Up Abroad. Now, if you think going to jail here is bad, wait till you go to one in Saudi Arabia or somewhere like that. So they had this guy, and he was like a bootlegger in Saudi Arabia. Alcohol is prohibited in Saudi Arabia. Women, if you go there, I remember the military women that go to Saudi Arabia are upset because they always have to keep their heads covered. You have to obey their laws. You cannot just go and go, hey, I'm a woman from the United States. I don't have to wear a head cover. Islamic law says you got to wear a head cover, so boom, you got to wear the head cover. Alcohol is forbidden, and they had this guy that was bootlegging alcohol, and what he was doing was he would take these, like, I guess what you'd say containers, almost like gas cans, fill it with alcohol, booze, and then tape it on the inside of his vehicle and drive it around. And they would stop him at checkpoints, and he would always be nervous. And he was like, this is the day they're going to catch him. Well, eventually, guess what? Oh, they got him. And then he went to jail in Saudi Arabia for like 15 years for transporting alcohol. And there is alcohol at these places, but once again, it's illegal to use it. In Jordan, you have a king, but he has to follow the Constitution. This implies simply that the king doesn't have all the power. Israel, you have a parliamentary democracy. You have a president, prime minister, and parliament, much like you have in Great Britain or England. In Turkey, you have a republic, but it still is, they have stricter laws than, of course, we have. That's where you find all of the kids with no arms and hands because they've been stealing. They get their hands cut off. But much of North Africa has experienced political unrest. Many of the countries are democracies, but have a history of suppressing fair elections. So you have a democracy in Libya, but the same guy wins every time because it's crooked. He cheats. Okay. Tensions in Southwest Asia. When Israel was created, this was a big problem. Israel was created as a Jewish state, and several Arab countries declared war against Israel. Israel is the only Jewish country surrounded by people that hate them in Muslim countries. The Palestinians were given control of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, but acts of terrorism against Israelis still continue today. Palestinians want a separate state. Israelis desire security. One of the things that you'll see, and you look here, here's Bethlehem on the outbanks of where you would find the West Bank. Inside of Israel, you'll find Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a holy city. I'm going to show you why to Muslims. And so they're not real thrilled about Israel having control over that. All right, here's one of your questions. Why are there religious tensions in the Middle East? One of the main things that you will find in the Middle East is conflict between these two branches of Islam, Sunni and Shia. And that's all you got to put. It's the split between the two branches of Islam, Sunni and Shia. And what that means is Shias, or Shiites, as they're called, believe religious leaders must be a direct descendant from Muhammad, which, Muhammad had many children, and that's quite an easy possibility. For example, his daughter Fatima, I think the last imam who was in charge of, uh, Islam, is a direct descendant of Fatima, who is Muhammad's daughter. Sunnis believe that their spiritual leader does not have to be a descendant from Muhammad. It just has to be someone who's a devout Muslim. And this, believe it or not, this causes a lot of conflict. In fact, Iran and Iraq is like the best example of this, because Iraq eventually fought a 12-year war with Iran. During this 12-year war, they used chemical weapons on Iran. Now, the United States backed Iraq. So we were like, Iran is worse than Iraq. Iran had captured some of our ambassadors, people who were there on diplomatic missions, and held them hostage for over a year. So we didn't like Iran. So we were like, yeah, we're going to support Iraq, and Iran hates our guts because of it even today. The irony is, eventually we have to fight Iraq in a couple of wars. You could call it war. Desert Storm wasn't much of a war, but that was a war. And then eventually George W. Bush goes in after 9/11. One of the weird things about that is, even if you didn't like Bush, I don't understand why we invaded Iraq. Iraq really had nothing to do. Osama bin Laden would look at the leader of Iraq like as a scumbag, because he was a Shiite, and Saddam Hussein is a Sunni Muslim. So he would look at him, he would be like, he's not a true believer. Okay, based on this, the belief that, Muhammad's descendants come from, descendants of Muhammad, or they're the leaders. All right, Iraq's modern borders were determined following World War I. The new territory brought together two Arabic groups, Shiite and Sunnis, and then the Kurds. When we watch Jacob in Iraq, he is not in the bad part of Iraq. He is in this area up here where you find the Kurds. The Kurds are located in the north, and it is a weird thing because the Kurds are a group of people, but they don't have their own country. They're sort of in Turkey, Syria, and Iraq. They're not allowed in Iran. And, basically nobody likes them. In one instance, Saddam Hussein used chemical weapons on them, which was a violation of international law, but nobody cares about that. Shiites represent about 60% of the population, but Sunnis control the country, at least until we took over and made it, more democratic. But Iran supported these Shiites, and that's why they fought in wars. Nobody likes the Kurds. I feel bad for them. They face discrimination, and they're not treated very well by any of the countries that surround there. Basically, they are a group of people with no country, and we've tried to set up a country in Iraq, but it never works out. So it's all bad. Iraq's problems. So in the 80s, Iraq waged war with Iran. 8 years, no winner. It's pretty much a stalemate. Eventually, Iraq invades Kuwait, and then the United States. I'm going to tell you how lucky I was. I was in a rapid deployment unit at Fort Ord, California, 9th Infantry Regiment, 7th Infantry Division Light, and we had just got back from Panama, and then this crap breaks off. So the first thing we're thinking is we're going. But because there were only 2 rapid deployment units, the 82nd Airborne went, and we stayed. So we got lucky. We did not have to go to Operation Desert Storm. But eventually, Iraqi forces were driven out by the U.S. It was probably the most brilliant military. I will tell you, there's great leaders in the United States, but this was like, I don't know how to, if you ever play poker or you ever play chess, this was like the most brilliant strategy. So what Schwarzkopf did is, Schwarzkopf was the general in charge. He was an American. It was UN forces, and he put troops in Saudi Arabia, and he put them right on the border. All right. So on the border of Iraq, if I can go back to the map. So right here. So he puts troops all down this border. And then here's the Persian Gulf, and here's Kuwait, which, Iraq invaded. So he brought all these ships in there and made it look like he was going to do a sea invasion and a land invasion. So Iraq, Saddam Hussein brings all his soldiers, brings all his soldiers to the border. Like chess, you're moving your pieces where you want to be for war. All right, so once he moves all his soldiers here, our Air Force takes over the skies of Iraq, destroys every plane that they have, destroys every airport, destroys every bridge, okay? So what does that do? Well, think about it. All these troops that are right here on this border, they have to rely on, transportation, bridges, cars bringing them what? Supplies, food. So basically, after about a month, these dudes were starving. And they surrendered to like news people. They were like, hey, we give up. We don't, we're hungry. These were battle hardened people who had fought 8 years with Iran. And they were like surrendering to news cameras. The guy with the camera was like, you can't surrender to me. I don't know what to do with all you people. And eventually, there's a movie called Jarhead. It's not for children, but it just always makes me think about this. Basically, the movie Jarhead was about Marine snipers who were there, and they were so upset because they didn't do anything. They didn't actually fight. These guys wanted to do their job, but they didn't do anything, so they didn't fight. And one of the best scenes is the guy. He's a sniper, and he's got this general, and he's about to pull the trigger on him, and they tell him to stop, and then all of a sudden planes go over and blow the dude up. So he was like, he's so mad because he thought, well, I'm finally getting to do something. And then it was taken from him. It's a crazy movie, but man, what a brilliant military strategy. We didn't lose a whole lot of people in that conflict. But Operation Desert Storm. In 2005, free elections were held. And, even today, people there still go back to the old way. They think their leader should be a Shiite Muslim. So you still don't have, I don't know. It's still kind of crazy there. Women voting in Iraq. This is something that you will not find in many of the Muslim countries. Women are not allowed to vote, but in Iraq, because we control it, we set up democratic sort of government. Afghanistan, wars have been common since 1978. They had a war with the Soviet Union where we backed them. And then the Taliban took over, and they are the ones that we blame for 9/11, Al-Qaeda, all that good stuff. Here are your women. In Afghanistan, women are treated very, very poorly. In fact, there's been a push. One of the interesting things, there's this picture, I'll try to find it too, of this, I think she is an Afghan woman who takes her burqa off and takes a picture of her face, and then they put it on Life magazine, I think. And she has these like beautiful eyes, but she's at great risk because if they figure out she's done this, they're going to do what? They're going to kill her, or torture her, or beat her. They do mutilation there where they take acid and pour it on girls, on their face and stuff. When you see these burqas, remember these women have to dress like this every day. They not offered education. You guys might take education for granted. These people just don't have any access to education. A young Pakistani girl who tried to bring education to them was burned with acid. We'll try to find her as well. I'm trying to go through this quickly. Building schools, the United Nations Children Emergency Fund, UNICEF. Only 28% of any Afghan is illiterate, meaning 28% of them can read and write. You think about in America, you don't even have 20% illiteracy here. most everyone can read or write. I would say it's like 5% illiteracy in the United States, maybe more, maybe it's growing. I don't know. But here you only have 28% of people who can read or write. Building schools in Afghanistan is critical. And it's kind of sad because look at attendance. It is growing since 2002. All right. I want you to notice right here, 2001. What is that telling you? So green is boys, purple is girls. 2001, you only had who going to school? Boys. And that's even before then, probably from the 70s to 2001, no girls. Then you have an increase in girls. Then you have an increase in everyone, and that's a good thing. People being educated. The reason, terrorist groups, the Taliban, they don't want people to be educated because then people start questioning the ideologies. This is one of my places I do want to go here. I will try to go once all this COVID nonsense is over. It is Dubai. The Sheikh and my friend Henzo Gracie is friends with this guy. The Sheikh, he decided to turn a small fishing village into a modern city in the desert, and now it's one of the fastest growing cities in the world. And they have this huge building here. I mean, modern, everything is really modern. They have one of the largest malls in the world. They're very pro-Western, meaning girls and women are not mistreated there. I do think some places you have to wear the head cover. They have beaches. You do have to dress. I mean, you can't go out there and wear some kind of crazy thong or something like that. But they have beaches. It's very touristy. It's not. And you can look and see it's very beautiful. It's a beautiful city. So I am interested in going there. Hopefully one day I'll be able to make it there. And there you see more of the city, and all of this is created. This is man-made. This is not natural, which is pretty impressive engineering wise. Rapid population growth is a concern. That's a concern everywhere, though. Lack of resources, lack of water. We looked at that yesterday. Strain of infrastructure and unemployment. Young people are often unemployed. Then they turn to extremism. Cultural influences, language. Here's one of your questions. What is the primary language spoken in the Middle East? It is Arabic. Arabic language is a, Islamic language. What I find interesting is a lot of the Middle Eastern countries don't just speak Arabic, but they, like Iran is, Persian because they come from the old Persian Empire. Kurdish, a couple, a little bit of Greek thrown in some of these countries because of their ties to the, Byzantine Empire. It's like old traditions die hard, but a lot of Arabic. Here's some of the clothing. Now, imagine if you lived. This picture right here shows you a lot of different, I think I showed you guys a video once of the girl who was like trying to do fashion with the head thing. And, you can still look in most Middle Eastern countries, you can still look, I guess, somewhat distinct with what you wear. But then Saudi Arabian women wearing the traditional head covering, or they cover their entire body. If you look at Afghanistan, the whole hijab, the whole thing is worn in those countries. Food, you have, all of these food places. Whenever I think of shawarma, I think of the Avengers movie, and they went to the shawarma place after saving the world. Hummus. If you eat hummus, you don't realize that it's a Middle Eastern sort of thing. Baklava is a Jewish dish. What's that? This looks like a pie, right? Yeah. Bazaars, enclosed marketplace where goods are sold. I should have put that on there, but anyway. All right, it asked you what type of art forms are predominant in the Middle East. Stained glass, geometric tiles, calligraphy, mosaics, and prayer rugs. Now, let me explain something. Muslims believe that you are not to depict the Prophet Muhammad in a picture. So you cannot draw a picture of or artist rendition of the Prophet Muhammad. In, I think it was maybe 2012, there was a cartoon in France where they made fun of Muhammad and said that he had an 8-year-old bride, and a guy went and killed the people that wrote that, or killed people that were associated with that. So, Muslims really do look at, whenever you see Jacob too, like Jacob, when he's there, he goes to a lot of the mosques and they all look like this. They're, mosaics, calligraphy, writing, but there's never any pictures. And the girl says that to him. She goes, you could tell this is Muslim mosque because there's no pictures. In the Byzantine Empire, you had pictures of Christ and, icons, iconic images, the cross and things like that. Muslims don't do that. They basically, use calligraphy, mosaics. A mosaic is like and there's not a good picture of it there, but a mosaic is like, you've probably seen them before. The Byzantines use this as well. It's like bits of broken glass that form some sort of, artwork or picture. All right, so look, it says the blank is a sacred mosque in Jerusalem. It is the Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Rock. And the Dome of the Rock is going to be important for you next year. You're going to need to know that when we talk about Islam. But the Dome of the Rock is in Jerusalem. And this is why many, many Muslims want to go to Jerusalem and visit the Dome of the Rock, where they believe Muhammad died and ascended to heaven. This is where he died. Sheikh Zayed built the Grand Mosque at Abu Dhabi, just a beautiful, beautiful architecture. You can see the minaret there, the onion-shaped domes. Super modern like building. All right. The large dome church in Istanbul, Turkey is called the Hagia Sophia. It was originally an Orthodox church, but when the Ottomans conquered the Byzantine Empire, they converted it to a mosque and added the minarets. They covered over, they built over all the Christian imagery there, but here recently they're taking it down and they're like showing the imagery. And I think it's really cool because, Muslims don't want to see it, but on the second floor, like if you're on the first floor of the mosque, you don't have to like see it, but they won't do the art that was in there originally at the bottom, but they're doing it at the top. Notice the minarets here. And then there is a balcony from which the Muezzin calls Muslims to prayer. But the Hagia Sophia, you will have to know that next year as well. All right, the Western Wall, or the Wailing Wall, is the most important religious site in the world for Jewish people. So it's the Western Wall, also known as the Wailing Wall. And then you see the Dome of the Rock is right there behind it. For many, many years after the Crusades, yes. You got a bathroom? Yeah. Let me pause this. For many years, the Muslims were in charge of the city of Jerusalem after the Crusades. Muslims won, the Christians lost, and you know, that's when they built things like the Dome of the Rock. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Christian church in the Old City of Jerusalem, claimed to be the site of Jesus's crucifixion and resurrection. And then finally, the shrine located in the middle of Islam's most sacred mosque in Mecca. It's called the Kaaba. The Kaaba. Remember our video of the two young men that say they're going to visit here, and they visit in a mini one? Inside of this, it's a rock. They do kiss the stone. What they do is they walk around it 7 times, and then they sacrifice an animal. Yep. Or they pay somebody to kill one or get a voucher. Yeah. It's to signify, remember, in the Hebrew Christian Bible, Abraham was told to sacrifice Isaac. Okay, but in Muslim faith, it's not Isaac, it's Ishmael, who's the favorite son. So God tells Abraham to sacrifice Ishmael, and then at the last minute, he tells him, don't do that, sacrifice the ram instead. And that's what that symbolizes. So after they do that, they sacrifice an animal to, symbolize Abraham sacrificing the animal after God told him not to sacrifice Ishmael. So that's why they do that. We did look at the Hajj a little bit more, and we all the crazy videos of people walking around, right? Y'all remember those, right? Yeah, okay. Maybe. All right. So we will, review for the test. Definitely when we